David stood there right at the edge where the land just stopped and the ocean began. The wind was strong that morning, pulling at his jacket, messing up his hair. He didn't care. For the first time in what felt like forever, he wasn't thinking about deadlines or meetings or what his boss needed from him. He was just standing there, looking at the waves crashing against the rocks below. In his pocket, folded into a small square, was a letter. He'd written it 3 times before getting it right. I resign from my position, effective immediately. 12 words that felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. 12 words that could change everything. 15 years. That's how long he'd been at the firm. 15 years of working late, missing birthdays, eating dinner at his desk while everyone else went home to their families. He remembered his first day so clearly, fresh out of law school, full of energy and big dreams about making a difference. His wife, Rebecca, had been so proud. She'd bought him a new briefcase and told him this was just the beginning of something amazing. But somewhere along the way, things changed. The cases got bigger, the paychecks got bigger, and the hours got longer. He kept telling himself it was temporary, just one more year, just one more big case, just until they paid off the house, just until their daughter got through school. There was always a reason to keep going, to keep pushing, to keep sacrificing. Last night had been different, though, really different. He'd gotten home around 11, which was actually early for him. The house was dark except for one light in the kitchen. His daughter Amy was still up, sitting at the table with her phone. She was 9 years old, and she looked up at him with these tired eyes that reminded him too much of his own reflection. "Hey, sweetie," he'd said, trying to sound cheerful. "What are you doing up so late?" She just stared at him for a moment. Then she said something that hit him harder than any judge's verdict ever had. "I wanted to show you my dance from the recital, but you weren't there. Again." He'd forgotten. Completely forgotten. It was marked on the calendar. Rebecca had reminded him twice. Amy had talked about it for weeks. And he'd forgotten because he was in a meeting that ran long, then another meeting. Then he had to review some documents that absolutely couldn't wait. "I'm so sorry, baby," he'd started to say. But she'd already gotten up from the table. "It's okay, Dad. I'm used to it." She'd said it so matter-of-factly without even sounding angry. That's what hurt the most. She wasn't even mad anymore. She'd just accepted that this was how things were, that her father wasn't going to be there. He'd stood in that kitchen for an hour after she went to bed just staring at nothing. Rebecca had come down eventually, wrapped her robe tight around herself, and they'd sat together in silence. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. They both knew something had to change. That's when he'd written the letter. Now, standing on this cliff with the ocean stretching out forever in front of him, he pulled out his phone. 7 missed calls already, and it wasn't even noon. His paralegal, probably panicking. He was supposed to be in court right now representing a huge client in a case that could make or break the firm's year. Instead, he was here, trying to remember what it felt like to breathe without his chest feeling tight. He thought about his father. The old man had worked in a factory for 40 years, came home tired every single day, but he'd been there. Every soccer game, every school play, every family dinner. David remembered asking him once why he never tried to move up, to get a better job, to make more money. His father had looked at him like he'd asked the strangest question in the world. "Son," he'd said, "money pays the bills. But time with your family? That's what makes life worth living. You can always make more money. You can't make more time." David hadn't understood it then. He'd been young, ambitious, hungry for success. He'd thought his father just didn't have enough drive, enough ambition. Now, standing here at 42 years old, he understood perfectly. His father had been the smartest man he'd ever known. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Rebecca. "Where are you? We need to talk." He'd been avoiding her all morning, not because he was angry or because he didn't want to talk. He was avoiding her because he knew what she was going to say. She was going to tell him that they needed the money, that they had responsibilities, that he couldn't just walk away from everything they'd built. And the worst part was, she'd be right. They did need the money. They did have responsibilities. Their mortgage alone was more than most people made in a month. But what good was a nice house if nobody was ever home to enjoy it? What good was money if he was too exhausted to spend time with his family? What good was success if it meant watching his daughter grow up through photos on his phone instead of being there in person? He typed out a response to Rebecca, then deleted it. Typed another one, deleted that too. What could he even say? Finally, he just sent, "I'm at the cliff, the one we used to come to." She'd know which one. Early in their marriage, before Amy was born, they used to drive out here on Sundays. They'd bring coffee and just sit in the car, watching the ocean, talking about their dreams. When was the last time they'd done that? He couldn't even remember. The sun was getting higher now, warming his face. He could hear seagulls calling to each other. The sound of the waves was constant, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. He wondered what it would be like to wake up every morning and not feel that immediate sense of dread, not feel like he was already behind before the day even started. 3 weeks ago, he'd gotten an email. It was from a small legal clinic that helped people who couldn't afford lawyers. They were looking for someone with his experience. The pay was nothing compared to what he made now. Maybe a quarter of his current salary, if that. But the email had talked about helping families fight unfair evictions, helping immigrants with paperwork, helping people who'd been treated wrong by landlords or employers, real people with real problems. Not corporations fighting over money. He'd applied without telling anyone. Not Rebecca, not his partners, nobody. He'd felt guilty about it, sneaking around like that. But he'd needed to know if there was another option out there. If there was, a way to still be a lawyer, still use his skills, but do something that mattered, something that would let him come home at a reasonable hour and actually be present with his family. They'd called him back within 2 days. They wanted to interview him. They were excited about his experience, his track record. During the phone call, the director had said something that stuck with him. "We can't pay you much, but you'll go to bed every night knowing you made a real difference in someone's life." When was the last time he'd felt that way? When was the last time he'd finished a case and felt anything other than exhausted relief, that it was over? He heard a car door slam behind him. He didn't need to turn around to know it was Rebecca. He could hear her footsteps on the gravel, then on the dirt path that led to where he was standing. She came up beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, and together they looked out at the ocean. Neither of them said anything for a long time. They just stood there, two people who'd been together for 17 years, who'd built a life together, who'd created a beautiful daughter together, standing at the edge of a cliff, trying to figure out what came next. Rebecca didn't say anything at first. She just stood there next to David, her hair blowing in the wind, her arms crossed against the cold. He could feel the tension between them, thick as fog. He wanted to speak, to explain, to say something that would make this easier, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, she broke the silence. "Your office called me 3 times. They said you missed the hearing. They said you're not answering your phone." David kept staring at the ocean. "I know, do you?" Her voice wasn't angry. That almost made it worse. She just sounded tired. Really deeply tired. "Do you know what happens when you just don't show up to court? When you abandon a client on the biggest day of their case?" "I couldn't do it anymore," he said quietly. "I woke up this morning and I couldn't." Rebecca turned to look at him now. "What does that mean?" "You couldn't?" "David, we have bills. We have a mortgage. We have a daughter who needs braces and wants to go to that summer camp with her friends. You can't just stop showing up to work because you're having a bad day." "It's not a bad day." He finally turned to face her. "It's been bad years, Rebecca. Plural. When was the last time we had dinner together as a family? When was the last time I tucked Amy into bed? When was the last time you and I actually talked about something other than schedules and bills?" She looked away. "That's not fair, isn't it?" He pulled the folded letter from his pocket. "I wrote my resignation last night, after Amy told me she's used to me not being there. Used to it. Like it's just normal for her dad to miss everything important in her life." Rebecca stared at the letter in his hand like it was something dangerous. "You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything." "And then what?" Her voice rose a little now. "We lose the house. We pull Amy out of her school. We tell her she can't have the life we promised her because Daddy decided he was tired. I'd rather give her a father who's actually present than a nice house she never sees me in. Rebecca laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's easy to say when you're standing on a cliff having some kind of midlife crisis. Wait until the power gets shut off. Wait until we can't afford her medication when she gets sick. Wait until we're explaining to her why we had to move to a smaller place, why she had to leave her friends, why everything changed. David felt something crack inside him. You're right. About all of it? You're absolutely right. But I can't keep doing this, Rebecca. I'm dying inside. Every single day I wake up and I feel like I'm drowning. And I keep swimming, keep pushing because I'm supposed to, because that's what responsible adults do. But last night, looking at our daughter's face, I realized something. I'm not teaching her responsibility. I'm teaching her that work is more important than people. That money is more important than being present. That you sacrifice everything, including yourself, for a paycheck. Rebecca's eyes were getting wet now, but she blinked the tears back. So what's your plan? Just quit? Just walk away from 15 years? He hesitated. This was it. The moment he'd been dreading. 3 weeks ago, I applied to a legal aid clinic. They help people who can't afford lawyers. Families facing eviction, workers dealing with wage theft, immigrants who need help with paperwork, real people with real problems. She stared at him. You applied for another job? Without telling me? I knew you'd react like this. Like what? Like a wife who deserves to be part of major life decisions. Like someone who's going to tell me all the reasons I can't do it. His voice was louder now. I knew you'd talk about the mortgage and the bills and all the logical reasons why I need to stay miserable. And you're not wrong. That's the thing. Everything you're saying is correct. But it doesn't change the fact that I can't keep living like this. Rebecca wiped her eyes roughly. How much does it pay? This legal aid job? He told her the number. Watched her face change. Watched the reality of it sink in. She couldn't even finish the sentence. David, that's not even a third of what you make now. I know. We can't survive on that. I know. So what are we supposed to do? This was the moment. The moment where everything either fell apart or somehow impossibly came together. David took a deep breath. There's something I need to tell you. Something I found last week. Rebecca looked at him warily. What? I was looking for the phone charger in your office. And I found a folder. A business folder with your name on it. Her face went pale. You went through my things? I wasn't trying to. I just saw it and, Rebecca, how long have you been running an online design business? She turned away from him, facing the ocean again. For a long moment she didn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. 2 years. Almost 2 years now. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you'd worry about the time. Because I knew you'd ask if I was neglecting Amy. Because I knew you'd want to know every detail. Want to help. Want to turn it into some big production. She looked at him now. I needed something that was just mine. Something I built by myself. After you go to bed, after Amy's asleep, that's when I work. That's my time. Those few hours where I'm not somebody's wife or somebody's mother or somebody's anything. I'm just me creating things, building something from nothing. David felt like he'd been punched. I had no idea you felt that way. How could you? You're never here long enough to notice. That hurt, but he couldn't argue with it. How much are you making? From the business? She told him. The number surprised him. It was good. Really good. Not as much as his salary, but more than he'd expected. I've been saving it, she continued. Not spending it on anything. Just putting it away. I told myself it was for emergencies, but really, I think I was saving it for this. For what? For the day when you finally broke. When you finally admitted you couldn't keep doing this. She looked at him with those eyes that had seen him at his best and his worst. That had watched him transform from an idealistic law student into an exhausted corporate lawyer. I've been watching you disappear, David. Piece by piece, year by year. The man I married had this light in his eyes, this passion for helping people. When did I last see that? When did you last feel that? He couldn't answer. Couldn't remember. I have about 6 months of expenses saved, she said. Maybe 7 if we're careful. The business is growing. I just landed 2 new clients last week, big ones. If I went full-time, really put everything into it, I think I could match half your current salary within a year. David's heart was pounding. What are you saying? Rebecca turned to face him fully now. The wind whipped her hair around her face, and in that moment she looked like the woman he'd fallen in love with in law school. Strong. Fierce. Unafraid. I'm saying I can't keep living like this either. I can't keep pretending everything's fine while our family falls apart. I can't keep being a single parent in a two-parent household. I can't keep watching you destroy yourself for a job you hate. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was steady and clear. But I also can't do this alone. I can't be the only one fighting for our family. I can't be the only one willing to take a risk. What kind of risk? She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the determination in her eyes, the fear, and underneath it all, hope. Real hope. You take that legal aid job. I go full-time with my business. We downsize. Smaller house, cheaper neighborhood. Amy goes to public school. We cut everything that isn't essential. We live lean for a year, maybe two. We take the savings I've built up and we bet on ourselves. We bet on our family. We bet that being present and happy is worth more than being comfortable and miserable. David felt like the ground was shifting under his feet. You'd do that? You'd give up everything we've built? We haven't built anything, David. We've just accumulated stuff. A big house that's always empty. Cars we barely drive. Furniture for rooms nobody uses. That's not a life. That's just things. She reached out and took his hand. I want my husband back. Amy needs her father. And you need to remember who you are before this job completely erases you. David stood there holding Rebecca's hand, feeling like the world had just tilted on its axis. Everything he thought he knew, everything he'd been afraid of, was suddenly different. She wasn't angry. She wasn't going to tell him he was being irresponsible. She was actually willing to do this with him. I don't know what to say, he managed. Then don't say anything yet. Rebecca squeezed his hand. But I need you to understand something. This isn't just about you quitting your job. This isn't just about taking a pay cut and hoping everything works out. If we do this, we do it all the way. No halfway. No keeping one foot in the old life while trying to build a new one. What do you mean? She let go of his hand and started walking along the cliff edge. He followed, listening. I mean, we have to be honest. With each other, with Amy, with ourselves. We have to admit that the way we've been living isn't working. That we made choices that seemed right at the time, but led us somewhere we never wanted to be. David thought about that. All those years of saying yes to one more case, one more late night, one more missed dinner. Each decision by itself seemed small, reasonable even. But added up over 15 years, they'd built a life he barely recognized. When did it happen? He asked. When did we stop being us? Rebecca stopped walking and looked out at the water. I think it was gradual. Like gaining weight, you don't notice it happening day by day. You just wake up one morning and realize your clothes don't fit anymore. Except instead of clothes, it's our life that doesn't fit. She turned to him. Do you remember our wedding day? What we promised each other? Of course. No, I mean really remember. Not just the vows everyone says. The things we said to each other that night, in the hotel room, when it was just us. She smiled a little, remembering. You told me you wanted to be a lawyer who helped real people. You said you'd seen too many good people get crushed by systems they didn't understand, and you wanted to be the person who stood up for them. You were so passionate about it. Your eyes were shining. David felt his throat tighten. He did remember. That version of himself felt like a stranger now. And I told you I wanted to create things, Rebecca continued. I didn't want to just have a job. I wanted to build something beautiful, something that mattered. We made all these plans. We were going to work hard for a few years, save some money, and then we'd both do what we really loved. We'd have a simple life, a good life, raising our kids and doing work that meant something. And then reality happened, David said quietly. No. Rebecca's voice was firm. That's what we tell ourselves, but it's not true. Reality didn't just happen to us. We made choices. Every single day, we chose the easier path, the safer path, the path that made sense on paper but didn't make sense for our souls. David wanted to argue, but he couldn't. She was right. My business, Rebecca said. It started almost by accident. One of Amy's friend's mothers asked me to design a logo for her bakery. Just a favor, nothing serious. But when I sat down to work on it, something happened. I lost track of time. I was completely absorbed. When I finished, I felt this incredible sense of satisfaction. I'd created something. something real and beautiful that didn't exist before. She pulled out her phone and showed him her design portfolio. David had never seen it. Page after page of logos, websites, brand identities. The work was stunning, professional, creative. He felt a pang of guilt that he'd never even known this existed. "This is amazing," he said honestly. "It's me," she replied simply. "The real me. The me I forgot existed under all the laundry and grocery shopping and parent-teacher conferences and being the wife of a successful lawyer." She put her phone away. "I love being Amy's mom. I love being your wife. But I also need to be Rebecca. Just Rebecca. The person I was before I became everyone else's something." David understood. He'd lost himself too. Somewhere between law school idealism and partnership track reality, David had disappeared. In his place was this hollow thing that looked like him, but didn't feel like him. A thing that went to meetings and billed hours and made money but didn't live. Not really. "So what do we do?" he asked. "Right now. Today. What's the first step?" Rebecca looked straight into his eyes. The ocean wind was blowing harder now, and she had to raise her voice a little to be heard, but her words were clear. Crystal clear. "Do it now." "Do what?" "Stop waiting. Stop planning. Stop being afraid." She moved closer to him. "Take out your phone. Call the legal aid clinic. Tell them you accept the job. Then send that resignation letter. Right now, right here. No more thinking about it. No more weighing pros and cons. No more what-ifs. Just do it." David's heart started racing. "Rebecca, this is huge. We can't just—" "Yes, we can. That's exactly what we can do. Because if we go home and think about it more, if we sit down and make spreadsheets and calculate risks, we'll talk ourselves out of it. We'll find a million reasons why the timing isn't right, why we should wait one more year, why it's too scary. That's what we've been doing for 15 years, waiting for the right time. Well, I'm done waiting." She reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, held it out to him. "The right time is now, not next month, not after the holidays, not after one more bonus. Now, today, this moment." David took the phone. His hands were shaking. He looked at the screen, then at Rebecca, then at the resignation letter still folded in his other hand. "What about Amy?" he asked. "Don't we need to talk to her first, prepare her?" "Amy will adjust. Kids are resilient, and honestly, I think she'll be happier with less stuff and more of us. She doesn't need the fancy school or the big house. She needs her parents. Both of them. Present and engaged and actually there." David thought about his daughter. Her face last night when she'd said she was used to him missing things. That hollow acceptance in her voice. What was he teaching her? That work always comes first? That promises to family can always be broken if something more important comes up? That being successful means being absent? "You're right," he said. "You're absolutely right. I know I am." Rebecca smiled, but there were tears in her eyes now. "I'm terrified, David. I'm so scared. We could lose everything. We could end up struggling, barely making it. I have nightmares about not being able to pay for things Amy needs. But you know what scares me more? Waking up 10 years from now and realizing we had a chance to change things and we didn't take it. Realizing we chose comfort over happiness. Realizing our daughter grew up and we missed it because we were too busy working to afford things we didn't need." David looked at his phone, at the resignation letter, at his wife standing there, willing to risk everything, willing to believe in a different kind of life. And he made his choice. He unlocked his phone and found the number for the legal aid clinic. His finger hovered over the call button for just a second. Then he pressed it. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. "Hello, Legal Aid Services. This is Jennifer speaking." David took a deep breath. Rebecca grabbed his free hand and squeezed it tight. "Hi, Jennifer. This is David Chen. I interviewed with you last week for the staff attorney position. I'm calling to accept the offer." There was a pause. Then Jennifer's voice came back, excited and warm. "That's wonderful. We're so happy to have you. When can you start?" David looked at Rebecca. She nodded, her eyes bright. 2 weeks, he said. "I can start in 2 weeks." They worked out the details. Start date, paperwork, orientation. When he hung up, his hand was still shaking. But this time it wasn't from fear. It was adrenaline, excitement, something he hadn't felt in years. One down, Rebecca said. Now the hard one. David opened his email, found the resignation letter he'd drafted last night, read through it one more time. It was professional, courteous, standard. It thanked the firm for the opportunities. It expressed regret for any inconvenience. It gave 2 weeks' notice. His finger hovered over the send button. This was it. 15 years. His entire adult career. His identity. His security. Everything he'd worked for. All of it about to end with one press of a button. Rebecca leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do it now," she whispered, "before we lose our nerve." David pressed send. The email whooshed away into the digital void. For a moment, nothing happened. They just stood there, two people on a cliff holding a phone that had just changed their entire lives. Then the phone started ringing. David looked at the screen. His senior partner. The call he'd been dreading. He looked at Rebecca. She nodded. He answered it. "David, where the hell are you? You missed the Caldwell hearing. Do you have any idea?" The voice on the other end was loud, angry, disbelieving. "I know, sir. I'm sorry. But if you check your email, you'll see I just sent my resignation." Silence. Complete silence. "Then you're what?" "I'm resigning. Effective in 2 weeks. I'm taking a position elsewhere." "Elsewhere?" "David, you're a senior associate. You're on track for partner. We've invested years in you. You can't just—" "I can, sir, and I am. I'll work the next 2 weeks to transition my cases. I'll make sure everything is handled properly. But I'm done." The conversation went on for another 10 minutes. Anger, then attempted negotiation, then more anger. Offers of more money, better hours, a lighter caseload. Everything David had wanted for years suddenly available now that he was leaving. But he didn't waver. For the first time in his professional life, he held his ground. When he finally hung up, he felt exhausted and exhilarated at the same time. Rebecca was grinning at him. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Terrified, free, excited, sick to my stomach. All of it at once." He laughed, and it felt good. When was the last time he'd really laughed? "What did we just do?" "We took our lives back," Rebecca said simply. She pulled out her own phone. "My turn." "Your turn for what?" "I need to send some emails too." She started typing. "I'm telling my biggest potential clients that I'm available full-time now. I'm raising my rates. I'm treating this like the real business it is, not just a side hobby." David watched her work, her fingers flying over the screen, her face focused and determined. This was a side of his wife he'd forgotten existed. The ambitious, driven woman who'd once talked about changing the world through design. Somewhere in the chaos of marriage and parenthood and supporting his career, she'd put herself on hold. Now she was pressing play again. They stayed at the cliff for another hour making plans. Real plans. Rebecca pulled up their finances on her phone and they went through everything. What they absolutely needed versus what they could cut. The mortgage payment was the biggest problem. Their current house was way too expensive for their new reality. "We need to sell it," Rebecca said matter-of-factly. "We can't afford it on what we'll be making." "Sell our house?" The reality of it hit David hard. "But Amy loves that house. It's the only home she's ever known. Amy loves us more than she loves a house. Trust me." Rebecca scrolled through real estate listings. "Look, there are plenty of good houses in good neighborhoods for half what we're paying now. Smaller, sure, but we don't need 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. We're never all home at the same time anyway. What's the point?" She was right, but it still hurt. That house represented everything he'd worked for. Every late night, every missed dinner, every sacrifice had been for that house. Letting it go felt like admitting failure. "It's not failure," Rebecca said, reading his mind. "It's choosing different. It's saying that house costs too much. Not in money, but in life, in time with each other, in being present. The price is too high." They decided to tell Amy together that evening. No point in putting it off. Kids could sense when something big was happening anyway. Better to be honest, the drive home was quiet. David kept expecting to feel panic, to want to take it all back. But instead he felt calm, settled, like something that had been twisted inside him for years was finally straightening out. When they got home, Amy was in the living room doing homework. She looked up when they came in, and David saw the surprise on her face. He never came home this early, never. "Hey, kiddo," he said, sitting down on the couch next to her. "Can we talk for a minute?" Amy closed her textbook slowly, looking worried. "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetie. Not at all." Rebecca sat on Amy's other side. "We just need to tell you about some changes that are going to happen." They told her everything. Well, not everything. The adult financial details she didn't need to know. But they told her David was taking a new job, that Rebecca was going to work full-time now, that they were going to sell the house and move somewhere smaller, that Amy would be changing schools. They waited for her to get upset, to cry, to complain, but Amy just sat there processing. Finally, she asked, "Will you be home more, Dad?" "Yes, much more." "Like for dinner? And on weekends?" "Every dinner. Every weekend. I'll be at every recital, every soccer game, everything." Amy looked at Rebecca. "And you'll be happy, Mom?" Rebecca blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I hear you sometimes. Late at night working on your computer. You sound happy, like you do when you're singing in the kitchen. But during the day you just seem tired all the time." David and Rebecca exchanged glances. They'd thought they were protecting Amy, keeping their struggles private. But kids saw everything, felt everything. "I will be happier," Rebecca said honestly. "We both will. This has been hard on all of us. But it's going to get better." Amy thought about it. Then she asked the question David had been dreading. "What about my school? What about my friends?" "You'll make new friends," Rebecca said gently. "And we can still do play dates with your current friends. They don't live that far away. But I like my school. I like my teacher." "I know, baby. This is going to be hard. Change is always hard." David put his arm around his daughter. "But sometimes we have to do hard things to make life better. Do you understand?" Amy was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that made David's throat tight. "Tyler's dad died last year. Heart attack. He was only 45. Tyler said his dad worked all the time and they barely saw him, and now he's gone and Tyler wishes he had more time with him." The words hung in the air. David felt like he couldn't breathe. "I don't want that to happen to you, Dad," Amy said, her voice small. "I'd rather have a smaller house and see you more." David pulled his daughter close, fighting back tears. "That's not going to happen to me. I promise. I'm going to be around for a long time. And I'm going to actually be here, not just physically present, but checked out." They talked for another hour. Amy asked questions. They answered honestly. She was scared about changing schools, but she was also excited that David would be home more. She wanted to see the new house before they bought it. She wanted to make sure her cat could come. She had a whole list of concerns, all of them valid, all of them manageable. That night after Amy went to bed, David and Rebecca sat in the kitchen with a bottle of wine. Neither of them were big drinkers, but this felt like a moment that called for it. "We really did it," Rebecca said, staring at her glass. "We really did." "Are you scared?" "Absolutely terrified, and me too," she smiled. "But it's a good scared. Like before a roller coaster. Not like the bad scared I've been feeling for years." David knew what she meant. The constant low-level anxiety of living a life that didn't fit, the dread of alarm clocks and Monday mornings, the feeling of being trapped on a treadmill that just kept getting faster. "What if we fail?" he asked quietly. "What if we can't make this work? Then we'll figure something else out, together." Rebecca reached across the table and took his hand. "But at least we'll have tried. At least we won't wonder what if." They made more plans, practical ones. Rebecca would list the house next week. David would start looking at smaller places in good school districts. They'd sit down with a financial advisor and figure out a real budget. They'd tell their families, deal with the questions and concerns that would inevitably come. It was overwhelming. But it was also exciting. For the first time in years, David felt like he was moving toward something instead of just running away from things. Around midnight, Rebecca's phone buzzed. She looked at it and her eyes went wide. "Oh my God, what? Remember that big client I pitched to last month? The tech startup that wanted a complete brand identity redesign? Yeah? They just accepted my proposal. Full price. This is huge, David. This is like 6 months of work. If I can land a few more clients like this," she trailed off, doing math in her head, "then we might actually pull this off." David finished. They looked at each other across the kitchen table. Two people who'd been married for 17 years, who'd built a life together that nearly broke them, who were now choosing to tear it down and build something new, something better, Something real. I love you, David said. I don't think I say that enough. Not really. Not with meaning. But I love you. For being brave enough to do this. For not giving up on us. For being willing to risk everything. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. I love you too. The real you. The you I married. Welcome back. 2 weeks later, David walked into his law firm office for the last time. The space felt different now. Smaller somehow. Less important. He spent the day handing off his cases, briefing other attorneys, packing up 15 years' worth of books and files and framed certificates. His colleagues treated him like he was crazy. Most of them, anyway. A few of the younger associates pulled him aside and asked him questions in hushed voices. How did he know it was the right decision? Wasn't he scared? Did he have a plan? David answered honestly. Yes, he was scared. No, he didn't have all the answers. But he knew he couldn't keep living the way he had been. One associate, a woman named Lisa who joined the firm 2 years ago, listened carefully to everything he said. Then she told him she'd been thinking about leaving too, that she'd gone to law school to help people but somehow ended up helping corporations avoid taxes, that she missed the version of herself who'd cared about justice instead of billable hours. Do it, David told her. Don't wait as long as I did. On his last day, the firm threw him a goodbye lunch. It was awkward. People gave speeches about what a great lawyer he was, how much he'd be missed, how the firm was losing a valuable asset. Asset. That's what he'd become. A thing that generated revenue. Not a person with a family and dreams and a life outside these walls. When it was finally over, David put the last box in his car and drove away. He didn't look back. The legal aid clinic was in a very different part of town. The building was old, needed paint, and had a parking lot full of potholes. Inside was cramped and chaotic. The furniture was mismatched. The computers were outdated. The coffee was terrible. David loved it immediately. His new boss, Patricia, gave him a tour. 4 staff attorneys, 2 paralegals, and an office manager working out of a space that would have been a single conference room at his old firm. The walls were covered with thank you cards from clients, real people with real names and real stories. It's not glamorous, Patricia said almost apologetically. We're always understaffed and underfunded. The work is hard and sometimes heartbreaking. We can't win every case, but the wins we do get, they mean something. They change people's lives. David's first case was helping a family fight an eviction. The landlord was trying to kick them out illegally, claiming they'd violated the lease when they hadn't. It was straightforward, simple even. The kind of case he could have done in his sleep at his old firm. But sitting across from the family in that cramped meeting room, seeing the fear in their eyes, the worry about where they'd go if they lost their home, seeing their teenage daughter trying not to cry, David felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose, real, actual purpose. He won the case. It took 3 weeks and lots of work. When the judge ruled in their favor, the mother hugged him and cried. The father shook his hand so hard it hurt. The daughter said thank you in a whisper. They'd get to keep their home. Their lives wouldn't be turned upside down. And David had done that. His work had mattered. At home, things were changing too. Rebecca's business was growing faster than either of them had expected. She'd landed 3 more major clients. She was working long hours, but she was energized in a way David hadn't seen in years. She'd converted their spare bedroom into a proper office. At night, Amy would sometimes sit in there doing homework while Rebecca worked, the 2 of them chatting and laughing. They'd sold their house within 3 weeks. Got a good price for it, too. Rebecca had cried the day they closed, walking through the empty rooms one last time. But they were happy tears. Letting go tears. The new house was smaller. Much smaller. 3 bedrooms instead of 5. 1 bathroom instead of 3. A tiny yard instead of the sprawling lawn they'd had. But it was in a great neighborhood. The public school was excellent. And the mortgage payment was half what they'd been paying. Amy adjusted better than they'd expected. She missed her old friends for a while. But she made new ones quickly. Her new school had a great arts program and she'd joined the drama club. She was in the school play. David went to every rehearsal he could. Money was tight. Really tight. They'd had to cut back on everything. No more eating out multiple times a week. No more shopping trips just because. They bought clothes at thrift stores. They cooked at home. They found free activities instead of expensive ones. But they were together. Actually together. David got home by 6 every evening. They ate dinner as a family. They talked about their days. They played board games. They went for walks in the neighborhood. They were present. Rebecca's parents thought they were crazy. David's mother called every week to ask if they were sure about this. Friends from their old life slowly drifted away. They didn't fit in anymore. The conversations about vacation homes and private schools and stock portfolios didn't resonate. They were living in a different world now, but they made new friends. Neighbors who were teachers and social workers and small business owners. People who cared more about community than status. People who prioritized time over money. 6 months in, David and Rebecca sat on their small back porch one evening after Amy had gone to bed. It was warm out. They could hear crickets and kids playing in the distance. Simple sounds. Good sounds. Do you regret it? Rebecca asked. Any of it? David thought about the question. Really thought about it. Did he miss the money? Sure, sometimes. Did he miss the prestige of working at a big firm? Occasionally. Did he miss having a house that impressed people? Not really. No, he said honestly. Not even a little bit. Me neither. Rebecca leaned against him. It's harder than I thought it would be. The financial stress is real, but I'm happier than I've been in years. And Amy? Amy's thriving, David finished. She's confident now. She talks to us. Actually talks to us about real things. She knows we're here. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Rebecca said, One of my clients asked me today how I managed to build a successful business so quickly. You know what I told her? What? That I didn't build it quickly. I built it over 2 years, late at night when everyone else was sleeping. But more importantly, I built it because I finally believed I deserved to. I spent so long making myself small, making my dreams small because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Be supportive, be understanding, put everyone else first. She turned to look at him. But you can't pour from an empty cup. I had to fill mine back up before I could be any good to anyone else. David understood. He'd been running on empty for years. Now working at the legal aid clinic, coming home to his family, living in alignment with his values instead of against them, he felt full again, not full of stress and obligations and resentment, full of purpose and connection and peace. A month later, Lisa from his old firm called him. She'd quit. She'd taken a job at a non-profit defending environmental regulations. The pay was terrible, but she was excited. Could he meet her for coffee and tell her honestly what the transition had been like? They met at a small cafe near his new office. David told her everything. The financial stress, the adjustment period, the moments of doubt, but also the joy, the freedom, the sense of living a life that actually belonged to him instead of one he'd been assigned. The first month was the hardest, he said. I kept waking up in a panic thinking I'd made a huge mistake. Rebecca and I had some really tough conversations about money, but somewhere around month 2, things shifted. We found our rhythm. We adjusted, and now? I can't imagine going back. Lisa listened carefully. Do you ever miss it? The big cases, the complexity? Sometimes, David admitted. But then I think about the mom I helped yesterday. She's a housekeeper, works 3 jobs, barely speaks English. Her employer hadn't paid her in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. She was about to lose her apartment. I got her not just the back pay, but damages too. When I told her, she cried. She said I'd saved her family. He paused. That feeling? That's better than winning any corporate case ever felt. As he drove home that evening, David thought about where he'd been a year ago. Standing on that cliff, holding a resignation letter, terrified and lost. He thought about Rebecca finding him there. Her courage, her clarity, her absolute refusal to keep living a lie. She looked straight into his eyes and said 3 words that changed everything. Do it now, not tomorrow. Not next year. Not when the timing was perfect. Now. That moment had required everything from both of them. Courage, yes, but also honesty. The honesty to admit they'd built a life that looked good from the outside but felt hollow on the inside. The honesty to admit that comfort wasn't the same as happiness. The honesty to admit they'd been slowly losing themselves in each other in pursuit of things that didn't actually matter. When David got home, Amy was in the kitchen helping Rebecca make dinner. Music was playing. They were laughing about something. It was such a simple scene. Nothing special, nothing Instagram-worthy. Just a family in a small kitchen on a weekday evening. But to David, it was everything. This was what they'd risked everything for. Not the absence of stress or struggle, but the presence of joy, real joy, the kind that comes from living in alignment with your values, from being present, from choosing people over things and meaning over money. Rebecca looked up when he came in. Their eyes met across the kitchen. No words needed. They both knew. They'd made the right choice. That night, after dinner was cleaned up and Amy was in bed, David and